Good afternoon to all of you. I'm thankful to Madras Tax Bar Association to give me an opportunity to discuss this topic. I'm thankful to my colleague Raghavan also in this regard. For next 1 hour or so, we will be discussing some topics related to GST. The title given to me is GST, a concern-based tax. That title is partly descriptive of what we are going to discuss. Okay. Why we call GST as a consumption tax? What is the significance for a tax lawyer? What's the significance for an economist? These are the few aspects we'll consider on this. Related to this and connected with this is how the governments share the revenue they collect from the taxpayers. That is, normally tax lawyers will say, sir, why are we bothered what the government does with the money? Okay. That will also have some bearing. Therefore, I'm going to deal with some provisions of the Constitution which we never normally ever refer to or use. But understanding those provisions of the Constitution will also be helpful to us in certain situations in GST. Those problems would have never arisen to us in central excise or income tax and service tax. Those who are familiar with sales tax would have faced a similar problem, and that problem may arise in GST. Therefore, we will be discussing those provisions of the Constitution which deals with what the central government will do with the money it collects. So those are the two broad topics we will be discussing. So we'll now go to the first slide. We read everywhere, GST is a tax on consumption of goods or services. Okay. And Honorable Chief Justice Justice Kapadia, one of the most famous tax judges our country has seen, has also said this in All India Federation in relation to service tax. Okay. So I will read what is set out in the judgment, and that is available on your screen. Service tax is a VAT, which in turn is a destination-based consumption tax, in the sense that is on commercial activity and not a charge on business, but on the consumer, and would logically be leviable only on services provided within the country. Service tax is a value-added tax. There are so many propositions which the Honorable Chief Justice has rolled out in this one sentence. Service tax is a VAT, which is in turn a destination-based consumption tax. I'll stop here for a minute. If you open up any dictionary in England of 1970 or 1980 and say what is VAT, it will say VAT is a general tax levied on all goods and services. So the dictionary meaning of VAT in England would be VAT is a general tax levied on all goods and services. What is the meaning of this word? VAT is a general tax. In England, custom duty used to be levied on selected commodities, not on all commodities, what is perceived as luxuries. Similarly, other taxes used to be levied on certain types of activities only. VAT, as enacted in UK, is a tax on generally on all goods and services. So general tax is, there are not listed goods or services on which alone tax is levied. It will be levied on everything. That's why it is called a general tax. The dictionary meaning of VAT in UK, in England, is not some constitutional definition of VAT. For example, you say I levy excise duty, everyone knows it's a tax on manufacture. If you say I levy custom duty, everyone knows it's a tax on import. Similarly, when you say I levy sales tax, you know there's a taxable event is sale. When VAT is mentioned as a general tax levied on goods or services. Okay. It is descriptive of the tax in force in UK. It is not representing any constitutional concept. In the sense, VAT is a tax on goods, you can say. It's a tax on services, you can say. So the dictionary meaning is referring to the VAT laws enacted in UK at that time. Next sentence is destination-based tax. What is the meaning of destination being taxed? A supplier in UK sells supplies to a customer in USA. The intention of the UK legislation is not to levy tax on that transaction. I repeat, the intention of the legislature is not to levy tax on that transaction. The supplier is in UK, the customer is in USA. It's an export from UK. In order to make tax exports competitive internationally, most countries do not want to levy tax on goods or services exported. Similarly, on the same token, all goods and services imported into their country, they want to levy VAT. Therefore, they call destination-based tax, meaning thereby, if the goods and services are destined for consumption outside UK, in USA by way of export, that tax structure enacted by the UK legislature does not tax the transaction. Similarly, goods and services imported into UK, the tax legislation as enacted by UK taxes the transaction. I said few minutes ago, when we say excise duty is a tax on manufacture. If there is no manufacture, you cannot levy excise duty. I said custom duty is a tax on import. If there is no import, you cannot levy custom duty. When value-added tax is a destination-based tax, one important point you must note. If UK wants to tax the supply by a supplier in UK to a customer in USA, there is no constitutional bar in levying that tax. The nomenclature value-added tax also does not mean it excludes a transaction involving supply from UK to a customer in USA. In other words, unlike excise duty, which you say automatically tax on manufacture, custom duty is a tax on import. If a government wants to levy tax on supply from UK to USA customer, that will ordinarily fall within value-added tax. I'm mentioning this point because first time when I saw this circular of the government in 2003, that service tax is a destination-based tax, I thought the supplier is in India and customer is in USA. The parliament cannot levy tax on the transaction. That is in my incorrect understanding. Parliament is perfectly within its competence levy GST or VAT on the transaction. It's a different matter for economic reasons, for development of trade. Government restrains itself from taxing it, or if taxing it, it refunds it. So when you say, when the judgment of Supreme Court says VAT is a destination-based tax, it is not a part of the definition of value-added tax. It is not as if the taxable event is only for consumption within the country. The taxable event can be for consumption outside the country. But as a matter of choice, they don't levy it. Okay. And this is achieved. How is this achieved? This objective is achieved by saying whenever do exports, we will exempt the transaction from tax. So I want you to clearly note that when you say VAT is a destination-based tax, all the tax laws as enacted by the various governments try to achieve this object by putting in place sections which achieve this objective. I was arguing one case before my Lord Justice Devdar in Bombay High Court. Sridharan, you tell me under which law you are not liable for export of services. I then told him, sir, if the parliament wants to levy tax on it, I am liable to pay tax. Fortunately, parliament has put in sections and rules in the act which will exempt you from tax. So that's first important point I want to understand, destination based tax. The second sentence is a consumption tax. It is also slightly misunderstood. Maruti is a manufacturer. It sells car to a dealer. It charges GST when it sells the car to the dealer. Dealer, he sells the car to the customer. Dealer, when he sells car to the customer, again charges GST. The GST law then tells the dealer, if you are going to pay output tax on your supplies to your customer, I will give you adjustment for the tax paid by you when you purchased the car from Maruti, what we call input tax credit. So there is a provision in the GST law which says suppliers can take credit of the tax paid on their purchases and adjust against the tax liability. As far as the consumer is concerned, he has no output liability. The consumer cannot therefore take input tax credit. We call GST as a consumption tax only because at the hands of the consumer, he is not able to take credit. Therefore, whatever tax he pays to the supplier is the effective tax in the chain of transactions. Therefore, GST is called a consumption tax only because the act in question provides for input tax credit. Imagine a GST law or a VAT law which does not provide input tax credit at all. It provides that Maruti will pay tax when it supplies to dealer. Dealer will pay tax when he supplies to the consumer. It does not provide the dealer can take input tax credit of tax paid by Maruti. Then this will not be a consumption tax. In other words, the future is a consumption tax is derived from the fact in business to business transaction, output supplier pays output tax but deducts the input tax paid by him. So it derives the name consumption tax only because input tax credit is available. That's what the principle is. We'll now go to the next slide. In case of cross-border transaction, the objective is achieved by taxing imports and zero rating exports. So when I said UK supplier selling to USA, the law will say you either don't pay tax on the supply made by UK supplier to US customer, or if you pay, I will refund it. Also, the act will say, I will give you input tax credit, even though on the supply made by you from UK to USA, you do not pay input tax. That input tax credit you can adjust against other liability or refund you in cash. That's what the meaning of this. So in cross-border transaction, that is a destination-based tax achieved by exempting exports and taxing imports. It also achieved by granting refund of input tax credit on items used for export. In case of supply within the country, and this is the most important point, and this is a peculiar feature of our GST law, and I request you to pay attention to this sentence. In case of interstate supply, the objective of destination-based consumption tax is achieved by center collecting the IGST and paying the state where the consumption happens its portion of IGST. Place of supply rules ensure tax goes to consumption state. Suppose Maruti in Gurgaon sells a car directly to Raghavan in Madras. Okay. Maruti in Gurgaon will issue an IGST invoice mentioning the customer as Raghavan and say customer is my unregistered customer. He is not registered for VAT. And will give the address of Raghavan as Madras address. Then Maruti will collect say 18% IGST from Raghavan. It will pay to the central government in Gurgaon. The central government, out of this 18%, 9% will treat it as towards central GST. and keep the 9% in its bank account. The balance 9%, which is equivalent to the SGST, will be handed over by the center government to government of Tamil Nadu. This is the crux of it. The money will be collected by the central government in the dispatching state from the selling dealer. If the selling dealer has sold to a consumer in Madras who is not registered for VAT or GST and who is not taking input tax credit, then having collected the money in Haryana, central government in Haryana, it will keep 9% in its own bank account and at appropriate time transfer this money to the state government of Tamil Nadu. Nothing goes to Haryana government in this. 9% towards central goes to center. 9% towards state share does not go to Haryana government but goes to Tamil Nadu government. Therefore, why Tamil Nadu? Because Raghavan, the consumer, is located in Tamil Nadu. Therefore, Tamil Nadu will get this 9%. Therefore, it is called a consumption state. In this very example, Maruti sells the car to a dealer in Madras, charges 18% IGST, right? Then dealer in Madras then sells to Raghavan. When dealer in Madras sells to Raghavan, it will charge 9% CGST and 9% SGST. It will take credit of the IGST charged by Maruti to the dealer. In this case, the 9% collected from Raghavan by the Madras dealer, it will be remitted to the central government. 9% collected towards state share will be remitted by the dealer to the state government, and state government will retain the money. So the IGST charge on Maruti to dealer transaction, that remains in a suspense account with the central government. When the dealer in Madras sells on payment of 9% CGST and 9% SGST to a customer in Tamil Nadu, he utilizes this IGST. Since the center has initially collected 18%, it will transfer 9% to central's account and 9% it will transfer to the state's account. Okay. And the state will get money. That is why we call consumption state, consumption tax. So either as a direct supply to the consumer or business to business dealings take place between businessmen in different states, ultimately supply to consumer in that state gets the SGST portion. Therefore, we call a consumption tax in interstate supply. So interstate supply, GST as a consumption tax, that principle is achieved by allowing either the state of consumption to collect local SGST and it retains it, or if it is preceded by an IGST, then also ultimately SGST is paid in that state and that money goes to the state. That's why in interstate supply, consumption based tax is achieved. We can now go to the next slide. Before we refer to this, why people prefer or why tax legislations prefer this basis of taxation, that is why the state where the consumer is located, that should get the money. I am told economists believe that manufacturers and businessmen can change their location depending upon tax advantage. If you tell Maruti that if you sell from Sikkim, your GST will be 4%, it will wind up its operation in Gurgaon and shift to Sikkim. As far as Raghavan is concerned, he is going to remain in Madras because of his family connection, professional, etc., etc. Therefore, consumers do not change their location based on tax advantage. Businessmen change their location based on tax advantage. Therefore, in order to prevent businessmen from locating for tax havens, if you link the GST to the state where the consumption is taking place, there will be no artificial arrangement made by businessmen. That's what the economists say, why consumption based tax is to be there. This is the rationale. So now I have told you broadly what is the meaning of destination tax, consumption tax, how it is achieved for interstate sale and across the country. Now I'm going to take you some provisions of the Constitution. As I told you in the beginning, many of my friends criticize, sir, this is a pet topic of you. This topic is not at all relevant for any tax lawyer or citizens of the country. Why do you waste time? I tell them, nothing in the Constitution is ever a waste. It has some practical relevance. Therefore, I'm going to tell you. The next 15-20 slides purely deal with what center money it keeps, what it gives to the state. Okay. But at the end of it, you will realize why it is relevant. We had this problem in sales tax. Ashok Leyland sold the trucks in Karnataka and paid sales tax in Karnataka. Madras government says, no, you're wrongly paid to Karnataka, you pay tax to Madras. It's a perennial problem. In my opinion, the scheme in GST substantially solves this problem. To understand that is, you as an honest taxpayer already paid tax in one state. You do not want the same tax to be claimed by another state. To resist such a claim, these points will be relevant. Okay. Now, I will run through little fast on these slides. Prior to 2000, under the Constitution, whatever personal income tax is collected by the center, that the center will share with the state as per recommendation of Finance Commission. I repeat, the central has collected, say, 10,000 rupees as personal income tax throughout the country. The Finance Commission will say, out of this 10,000 rupees, Mr. Central Government, you keep 6,000 with you, balance 4,000 you give to the states. So center will use it for its development activities, state will do it for development activities. Second, the Finance Commission also will say, out of this 4,000, how much money has to go to Uttar Pradesh, how much has to go to Maharashtra, how much has to go to Orissa. They keep in mind the state of development of the state, development requirements of the state, and say, Maharashtra is fairly advanced. We'll give lesser share to Maharashtra. We give more share to UP. So I want you to understand this clearly. Finance Commission will say how much center should retain, how much should give to the states. Finance Commission also will say within the states how much each state will get. It will mention as a percentage. Out of total collection, 58% is retained to the center, 42% for the state. Out of the 42%, 10% will go to UP, 5% to Bihar, etc. That's what we'll say. Similarly, central excise duty collected by the center, okay, will also be distributed to the state. That is usually based on recommendation of Finance Commission, but for distributing it, there will be an act passed by the Parliament, Union Duties of Excise Act, Distribution Act. Based on that, center will say excise duty will be given to the states in this ratio, etc. As far as income tax is concerned, President will pass an order and a distribution of revenues order. That's what the sequence is. So kindly note the difference. Income tax, Finance will recommend, and President will pass an order under Article 279 or something called Distribution of Revenues Order 2005. Can you show that? Not possible. Then go to the next slide. So pre-2000, these taxes collected by the center will be retained by the center. It will not be given to the states. Custom duty, corporation can give tax, wealth tax, service tax, interest tax, hotel receipts, expenditure tax. Only income tax and central excise duty used to go to the states for appropriate share. Custom duty never used to go to the states. Okay, go to the next. We all would have seen minister announcing, sir, I'm putting a surcharge of 10% on income tax. I'm putting education of 2% on income tax. I put education on excise duty. I put education on custom duty. Why are they doing it? Under Article 271, pre-2000, Surcharge and income tax, center can keep it with itself and need not give to the state. In other words, even though personal income tax has to be shared between the center and the state as per Finance Commission's recommendation, Article 271 specifically said, as far as surcharge is concerned, Parliament will levy it for the purpose of the union and retain with itself. Okay. So that's what 271 will say, surcharges. Okay. This is the scheme now. Now, post 2000, similarly, cess on education cess and excise duty is also excise duty. Education cess on custom is also custom duty. Education cess on income tax and income tax. Similar to Article 271, if the union government wants to not part with it with the state, but use it for a specific purpose, then it is called a cess. The difference between surcharge and a cess is, surcharge is an increase to the tax for the purpose of union. Cess also is retained by the union, not given to the states, but for a specific purpose. For example, you may put a rubber cess act, that is for development of rubber industry, and the money will be given to the rubber board. It will not go to general expenditure of the central government. So cess is a tax collected for a specific purpose. Cess again is retained and not shared to the states. Post 2000, an important change took place. The Finance Commission said the old formula of sharing income tax and central excise duty with the states and not sharing custom duty, wealth tax, gift tax, service tax, etc. is not proper. Center should share all its tax with the states. That's what Finance Commission recommended. Constitution, Parliament accepted it. It amended the Constitution. It said under Article 270, all central taxes will now form part of one pool and distributed to the states according to recommendation of Finance Commission. So now, after 2000, income tax, wealth tax, custom duty, excise duty, service tax, everything will form part of central pool, and then Finance Commission will say, center, you retain this much with you, this you must give to the states. So if you see 14th Finance Commission, it says state share of the net proceeds is 42%, 58% is center share. I don't know whether you people recollect, after GST was introduced, excise exemption to units in Baddi, etc. were withdrawn. Then the government came with the industrial subsidy scheme. And industrial subsidy scheme said, 58% of the central GST you pay to us, we will give you back as refund. Why did they get this 58%? Because 58% is a share retained by the center of the central taxes. That's why in the industrial subsidy scheme said 58% of CGST paid we will give you as refund. There's no other magic, because 100 rupees collected as CGST by the central government, 42% goes to the state, 58 alone is retained. What the center says, because you put up a unit in backward area and northeast, etc., whatever I collect, I give it to you. That's the reason for this. This post 2000, all central taxes form part of one pool. That's what you must remember now. Go to the next slide, please. Surcharges continue. Surcharge levied for a specific purpose, for the purpose of the union, need not be shared by the center with the states. That position remains unaltered. Okay. Again, I want to repeat, when the Finance Commission says center will keep 58% and 42% will be given to the states for the years 2015-2020, individual states of the shares, Finance Commission will recommend, depending upon the revenue requirement of the various states. Okay. Obviously, post the GST, the slight changes in the constitution. SGST will be collected by the states and retained by the state. There is no provision in the constitution dealing with it. Constitution only says center may collect tax and give it to the states. As far as state collecting, give it to the center is unheard of. So SGST, there is nothing in the constitution. States will collect and retain it. IGST 269A says it will be shared by the center and the state as per law made by the Parliament. Which is the law made by the Parliament? Section 17 of the IGST Act. Normally, we don't read beyond section 16 of IGST Act. Section 16 is zero rating. We stop with that. 17 and 18 are internal matters with the central government and the state government. And 17 and 18 are relatable to 269A and 270. So, 269A says IGST will be shared with the center and the state by law made by the Parliament. The law made by the Parliament in this regard is section 17 of the IGST Act. And we will see that in a minute. Center share of IGST will go to the center as per section 17 of IGST Act. Okay. Now, we saw new article 270 post 2000. All central taxes will form part of one central pool. In accordance with that, CGST collected by the central government will form part of central pool. Central government share of IGST will also form part of the central pool. So once the GST collected by the center, either as IGST or as CGST, forms part of central pool, it will be distributed to the states as per the recommendation of Finance Commission. Earlier, excise duty and service tax to be shared to the states. Now, CGST and CGST portion of IGST will be shared with the states, apart from income tax, etc., etc. IGST collected on imports also will be shared with the states, and that will be as per recommendation of Finance Commission. This is after the 101st Amendment. Next. Sorry, go back to the earlier slide, please, if you don't mind. I don't know whether it's come later. I said IGST collected, center share will be retained to the center, state share will go to the state. Section 17 of the IGST Act will say which state the money will go. About 20 minutes ago, I bored you all with the example of Maruti selling a car directly to Raghavan and charging IGST. I said the SGST portion of the IGST will go to Tamil Nadu. Section 17 of the IGST Act says so. It says, based on the place of supply, IGST on which nobody has taken credit will go to the state where consumption takes place. So when we say GST is a consumption tax for within the country transaction, it is called a consumption tax because amount collected by the center as IGST, the center portion center retains it, the state's portion center hands over to the state where the consumer is located, and that is provided section 17(1) of the IGST. That is why it is called a consumption tax. The slide number is it? Okay. So now so far I have finished. I'm going to take you to completely different topic, and that is to illustrate how, in my humble opinion, the judgment of Supreme Court on Mohit Mineral conclusion is correct, but it has made an error in the reasoning. Okay. For leading you to that, we will be referring to this. I'm now referring to section 18. This is not section 18 of the IGST Act, but section 18 of the 101st Constitution Amendment Act. Okay. Introduced September 2016. As you all know, when GST was being introduced, states were worried that there will be loss of revenue to them. The center assured that don't worry, whatever sales tax you are collecting, and after GST the amount is reduced, I will give you compensation for it. In other words, Maharashtra was collecting 1 lakh rupees as sales tax, OCTRA, etc. After GST comes, it is able to collect 80,000 only as SGST. Then center says, I will give you 20,000 rupees by way of compensation. Okay. So section 18 of the Constitution Amendment Act says, Parliament by law on the recommendation of Goods and Service Tax Council provide for compensation to the states for loss of revenue arising on account of implementation of the goods and service tax. The most important point we should note is distribution of revenue collected for compensation will be distributed in the manner provided by law by the Parliament. Parliament may law provide for compensation to the states. Article 270 said everything collected will form part of central pool. Then it will be shared with the central and state as per Finance Council recommendation. But this section 18 of the Constitution Amendment Act says what is collected as compensation will be distributed as per law made by the Parliament. I am saying something slightly inaccurate. What I am saying is not flowing from the language of section 18, but assume that to be correct for a minute. In other words, what is collected under the nomenclature of compensation cess will not be subject to the rigors of Article 270, in which case 58% will return to the center, 42% go to the state. Rather, it will be distributed in the manner Parliament specifies. So section 18 of the Constitution Amendment Act itself provides a special mechanism for distribution of what is collected as compensation cess. I request you to note this point specifically because this is the point which has been overlooked by the Supreme Court in Mohit Minerals. Next. Compensation Cess Act says for selected commodities we levy a GST. Section 8 provided for it. Section 7 says how much each state will get. Broadly speaking, it said whatever the state tax collected by the state earlier, say 1 lakh rupees, what is the GST being collected by Maharashtra? 80,000, 20,000, I'll give it to you. That's what broadly section 7 says. Mohit Mineral case was the first case of GST decided by the Supreme Court. The assessee in that case challenged levy of compensation cess on coal. Petitioner challenged the levy of compensation cess enacted by the Parliament. Petitioner contended there is no specific part of the Constitution levy compensation cess. Compensation does not fall in any entry in the 7th schedule. Section 18 only enforced the Parliament to make law to compensate for loss of revenue. It did not provide for levy of cess. Kindly note this. And there cannot be two levies on same taxable event until amount to double taxation. Third point is more important. Section 18 does not provide for Parliament to provide for compensation, does not enable Parliament to make a law levying it. Okay. Supreme Court upheld it is not unconstitutional. It says Parliament is residuary under Article 248. It's a very important observation of the Supreme Court. Okay, we will see that. It says GST in the form of compensation cess can be levied by the Parliament entry 97 read with Article 248. And then, in my respectful submission and with great humility, Supreme Court said Article 270 enables the constitutional levy of cess by the Parliament. And if you read Article 270, it says all taxes other than cesses, excluding cess. So 270, because 271 deals with surcharge and cesses, and 270 is for basic tax. Supreme Court, with respect, overlooked that 270 excludes surcharge and cesses. So complete oversight. Section 18, Supreme Court says itself is an authority to levy compensation cess. And 246A also authorizes it. According to me, the first reasoning of the Supreme Court is, with respect, incorrect. Second reason of Supreme Court, with respect and humility, is a complete oversight and howler. Third submission is partly correct of the Supreme Court. They could have got a better reasoning. Fourth reasoning is perfectly correct. 246A, Parliament has power to make any law on GST, and that alone should have been the reason. Supreme Court could have said, Mr. Assessee, Section 18 is not necessary for levying GST on compensation cess. That is taken care of by 246A. Section 18 is necessary because ordinarily GST collected will be shared in the center and state as per Finance Council recommendation. We want compensation cess to be given to the states entirely, and that too based on a special formula. Therefore, sharing of the booty collected as compensation cess is different from sharing of the booty in the form of other taxes. We need a special formula for that. Therefore, 18 is enacted. I repeat, Section 18 is enacted in the Compensation Cess Act because if 18 is not there, whatever is collected by the center will be 58% will be retained by the center, and 42% will go to the states, and 42% also will go to the states based on their backwardness of the development. Whereas purpose of the compensation cess is entire money should go to the states only. Center should get nothing out of it. And two, how much each state should get? Each state should get the difference between what it has collected as sales tax earlier and what is now collecting as GST. Whereas Finance Commission will say UP, Bihar, Orissa are backward states. They need more work money for development activity. So the formula for distribution of compensation cess is to be different from what is under 270. Therefore, the Constitution itself should say, despite what I said in 270, I want as a temporary measure how to deal with compensation cess. That's the purpose of 18. It is not the source for levy of tax, the source for distribution of revenue. Now, proceed further. (246) we saw Gujarat, Ahmedabad Supreme Court judgment. Cess is the nature of tax. If Parliament has power to levy income tax, it can levy education cess and income tax. If Parliament has power to levy custom duty, it can levy education cess and custom duty. If state legislatures do not have power to levy custom duty on imported goods, they cannot levy education cess on imported goods. So cess is leviable if the basic tax can be leviable, and cess is only has the same character as the basic tax, only that it will be used for special purpose. Okay. Compensation is a law related to goods and service, therefore it can be written 246A. States can levy cess on supply of goods and services 246A. Yes, if they choose, if the GST Council permits, because GST Council says we'll have uniform rates. Because of this, Kerala said we have a flood, we need huge amount of money to reconstruct. Please permit us to levy on a special basis, and therefore they levied as a Kerala flood cess. If we ask the constitutional basis under which Kerala state legislature enacted it, it is 246A1, and that is why it is not levied on interstate, purely for local supplies only. Next. Section 18 provides for distribution of the collected to states in the manner provided by law by the Parliament. Next. And now see 271. Notwithstanding anything in 260 and 270, Parliament may at any time increase any of the duties of taxes referred to in the articles except goods and service tax 246A. While Constitution was being drafted and GST was being agreed to, the state said, we now have a very bad experience with the center. It doesn't increase the income tax rate. It keeps on increasing surcharge. Because when they keep on increasing surcharge, that they need not give to the states. We don't want that to happen. Whatever you want to levy, you levy as GST itself and share with us. Therefore, when the states were negotiating the center, they told the center in 271, you will not have power to levy surcharge and GST. Because if you levy surcharge, you need not distribute it. Mohit Minerals overlooked this and said, and 271 can be read with 270. Okay. Now see 270. 270 says, center will share all taxes and duties referred to the union list, excess duties, taxes referred to in Article 262A, except taxes and duties referred to 271 and any cess levied for specific purpose. These are outside purview of 270. A cess and surcharge levied by any government will be outside the distribution pool. And the Supreme Court Mohit Mineral has overlooked the word except and assumed that 270 gives the power to levy cess. Firstly, 270 is not the source of legislative power. That is confined in 245, 246, 246A. 270 is a manner of distribution between the center and the state. So 270 is never the source of any legislative power. That's with respect overlooked by the Supreme Court. Secondly, 270 says we'll exclude cess from the part of distributable revenue with the state as center. And 271 says you can levy surcharge other than on GST. No. Now, the other reasoning of the Supreme Court that under entry 97, rate with 248, this levy can be sustained is little worrisome, because tomorrow center can levy excise duty, which they have abolished. They can levy sales tax, which they have never had power, which state alone, because entry 97 cover any taxes. So if entry 97 read to 248 is to cover power on the parliament to levy any tax, all the taxes subsumed in GST can be indirectly once again levied by them under entry 97, which violates 279A. GST Council will recommend taxes to be subsumed in GST. Okay, you once again resurrect it. Then with respect, Supreme Court has made a small error or a big error in Mohit Minerals. And when it says it has overlooked the fact 248A is subject to 246A. Subject to 246A means anything and everything not in state list or concurrent list, Parliament can legislate, but with the exception of GST. So GST can never be governed by 248. Okay. We'll stop with this. One small point. This just as a, we'll end with this. The Constitution amendment came in September 2016. GST law came in July 2017. At one point of time, center continued to levy excise duty and service tax post September 2016. States continued to levy sales tax post September 2016. People were saying, when the Constitution omitted entry 54, etc., how can the states levy state tax? How can the center levy excise duty? Then somebody said section 19 of the Constitution Amendment Act enables it. Then somebody said section 19 says states can continue, the center cannot levy. In other words, question is, post September 2016, when Constitution amendment of GST has come into force, GST legislation not come to force, what about existing taxes? Can the existing legislation continue? Section 19 of the Constitution Amendment Act, 101st Constitution Amendment says, notwithstanding anything contained in this Act, any provision, any law relating to tax on goods or services or both in force in any state immediately before the commencement of this Act, which is inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution as amended with this Act, shall continue to be in force until amended or repealed by a competent legislature or other competent authority, or until expiration of 1 year from such amendment, whichever is earlier. This section 19 says all the existing laws which are inconsistent with the Constitution will continue. If you look at Article 372, etc., it will say all laws which are consistent with the Constitution will continue. 19 says whatever existing laws are inconsistent with the Constitution, they will also continue. So, but people said laws relating to tax on goods or services are both in force in any state, they can continue. Therefore, state can levy sales tax, center cannot levy excise duty and service tax. There's a fundamental error in this query. Central Excise Act enacted by the Parliament is in force throughout the country. That means it is in force in the states also. Normally, we are used to Parliament legislating for the whole country, but nothing prevents the Parliament from levying excise duty for goods produced in Maharashtra alone. It is possible. We are not used to it. So while the state cannot make a law for outside the state, Parliament can make a law for the whole of the country or any state. So when you say law in force in a state, it does not refer to state legislations. It refers to central legislation also, but is in force in that state. For example, service tax was not in force in the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir. Okay, so that's not a law in force in state of Jammu and Kashmir. Therefore, that will be unaffected. But excise duty was in force in Jammu and Kashmir. Excise duty was in force in Karnataka, Maharashtra, all states. Therefore, the doubt that post September 16, prior to July, excise and service tax collections are invalid or incorrect. Section 19 is part of the Constitution itself. Okay. I must also tell you, center normally cannot legislate for sales tax. So somebody said, sir, they are permitting sales tax law to continue. Who is the center to say sales tax law can continue? Because as far as sales tax is concerned, state legislature alone has competence. But the most important point to note is section 19 is not an ordinary legislation by the parliament. Section 19 is part of the Constitution. It has been introduced following the procedure prescribed in the Constitution for amendment of the Constitution. In other words, section 19 is a law made by the parliament, no doubt, not as a parliamentary body, but as a constitutional body. If you ask me, the source of power for section 19, source of power is not article 245 or 246 or 246A. It is power to amend the Constitution. Therefore, section 19, to the extent it deals with continuous sales tax law, does not fall outside the purview of the parliament, because parliament is not legislated under 245 246 with reference to state list. Parliament is legislated in its capacity as a constitutional body in the power to amend the Constitution. With this, I want to end. Some repeal, etc. Today only Gujarat High Court has delivered a judgment. So I don't. I prepared the slide yesterday. Whether the state legislature can amend the sales tax law after the repeal of it. Okay. So today I am told Gujarat High Court has delivered a judgment, and we were asked to address the court. And so the court has taken a view that the state legislature cannot amend the sales tax law after that. Okay. So that is little intricate. So that will take time. Therefore, I don't want to deal with that just now. With this, I'll end my discussion. Now people can ask whatever questions they want. If I can answer them, I'll try and answer. Okay.
Thank you very much, sir, for your detailed explanations on the topic. If anyone has a question, you can either raise your hands or send a message so that I can unmute you and you can ask the question to our sir.
If there are no questions, everything is very clear. That means.
Sir, no I think we got one question, so I'll just unmute it.
Yeah, please.
Yes, Mr. Karthik, you can ask your question.
I'm not able to hear, sir.
Mr. Karthik, are you able to hear me? I have unmuted you. You can ask your question, please. Sir, I think he's not able to hear us. I'll pass on the next question. Mr. Natarajan, I have unmuted you. You can ask your question.
Sir, good afternoon. Thank you for the wonderful session, sir. I'm Natarajan from Chennai.
Yes, sir.
Sir, you were explaining that section 19 of the Constitutional Amendment Act is very brilliant, sir. I was able to understand it very clearly. Only one doubt on that. There is also a view that any show cause notices which are pending under the S12 VAT laws or S12 laws cannot be continued after 1 year from passing of the GST amendment. There is one particular view which is going around, which is also connected to this section 19. Can you throw some light on that, sir?
My personal view is those contents are incorrect. Okay. It is different. If the state legislature is amending the sales tax law today, that the state legislature cannot do. Okay. But as far as continuing the pending show cause notices, according to me, they can continue. Okay. Though I have been asked to argue a matter in the Madras High Court, say that notices cannot continue, that we will see what arguments can be raised. But no, they can continue. The reason is this. all the existing laws are continued by Section 19 of the Constitution Amendment Act. Okay. And then the GST laws repeal the sales tax law. And the GST laws, when they repeal the sales tax law or the Excise Act, okay, contain a saving clause. So, apart from general saving content is Section 6. So, therefore, in my view, all the existing service tax, sales tax law, etc., are continued by Section 19, despite repeal of entry 54, etc., etc. And 19 is part of the Constitution, as we discussed. Okay. And that says until repealed, and those existing laws repealed with the CGST, SGST law, and they have a saving section. And therefore, in view of that saving section, pending proceedings can continue. Fresh proceeding can be initiated for the past period. Okay. That's my.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
So next question, I'll ask one. Ayushri, you can ask your question.
Good afternoon, sir. Your
Yeah, tell
session
me.
was really great.
Thank
It was very informative. I have one question. It is relating to Section 19 only. It says that only the provisions which are inconsistent to the Constitution can be amended or repealed.
Will continue.
Right? Will continue until amended or repealed.
Right.
Or until 1 year. But I am from Telangana, sir. And now in Telangana, under the savings clause, Telangana legislature enhanced the limitation period of the revision authority from 4 to 6 years.
That will fail. Today only Gujarat High Court has delivered a judgment.
Okay.
Today only, and that amendment will be invalid.
Okay. And also
any amendment by the state legislature, that will be invalid. In fact, if you all permit, we can have a separate session on that. That will take 1 hour.
Okay.
Very fascinating point. It took me 2 months with the help of my colleagues Somesh Jain and Raghavan and Anand. So I was vacillating from this to this. Very, very fascinating point. And I am sure that's not a point which will ever come across in our lifetime, because these are one-off cases. And there will be many lawyers who wouldn't have come across such a case in their lifetime, because this is peculiar situation of entry being deleted, etc. So if you all want a separate session, but Gujarat High Court has correctly held amendment by the state legislature is non-est and invalid. But pending show causes, taking advantage of the existing law, they can do.
But sir, it says within 1 year it can amend. So it has amended within 1 year only.
No, within 1 year also there is no power to amend, madam. That doesn't mean that.
Okay.
It sets out the outer time limit.
Okay.
It sets out the outer time limit by which the existing law will lapse. If you don't bring in a GST law, let me just explain one more thing. Sorry, of course we'll deal with it.
Sure.
We will deal with it when you have if you all have a separate session. A repeal and saving section does not continue the old act for the future. Let me repeat. A repeal and saving section does not continue the repealed act for the future. The repeal and saving section retains the repealed act only for the past period.
Okay, sir.
People mistake the repeal section as if the old act is continuing. The old act is dead and gone.
Okay.
It says for the period the repealed act was in force, old act was in force. By virtue of repealed section, these things can be taken. Okay. Forget about
one
this.
More question.
Just forget about this case for a minute.
Okay.
Suppose Andhra Pradesh Endowment Act is repealed without a saving clause. Okay.
Yes.
And pending action can continue. After some time, can the repeal act be amended?
No,
the act is non-act. That's the point. So people make the mistake assuming as if repealing saving section continue the old act for future. It continues the old act for future only to preserve past period or past actions. Okay. What's the next question, madam?
So there is one question from Mr. Jairaj. I'll just unmute him.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I'm able to hear you.
I have 2 questions. One question is regarding if I am a person who has received a consignment and I have paid GST on it, but my customers have not received anything from me, and ultimately I become the end user because the material rots. Now, do I have any relief under GST law because of the situation now? Instead of being the retailer, I become the end user in the eye of law. So is there any way I can have a relief under GST for the GST I paid?
These are imported goods, sir?
Not imported, sir. Within the country, the goods are moving, but I am not able to sell to the customer now because of the lockdown.
Okay.
At least, do I have any relief regarding the GST I paid to the distributor?
You charge for the distributor, but he is not paying you the money.
The e-way bill records my GST being paid to the distributor, but I have not passed on the goods to the customer.
Okay.
The goods are perished. So I ultimately become the end user instead of my customers being the end users.
No, therefore, I'm not clear. You have made a supply to distributor is to supply to the customer. Okay. The goods have perished, and therefore supply between the distributor and the customer has not taken place.
Yes.
Your supply to you distributor has taken place.
Yes. Now between me and the distributor, how do we solve this problem? Because we need to have future relationship. Is there any solution under GST?
No, I may be wrong, but my answer is, it's a case where supply has not taken place. Though you purported to supply, actual delivery has not taken place. Goods are not been effectively supplied. Okay. And distributor is not paying you also. Okay. So therefore, in your GST return for the appropriate month, claim a refund for this through adjustment. So issue a credit note to the distributor and claim relief on that basis. If I understood you correctly, the goods are perished, okay, and therefore transfer to distributor and customer has not taken place. If we can demonstrate, it's very important, that the property has not passed to the distributor, and therefore supply has not been made by you to the distributor, then you get relief under 13, whatever provision is. If on the other hand, your property has passed to the distributor, and thereafter the goods have got destroyed, then you may not be eligible for relief. The only way you can get through in that is, if you say property has not passed to distributor till the time he has made the payment, since the property has not transferred to distributor also, supply has not taken place, and therefore you can get credit note adjustment. So conclusion is, you must look at the term of your contract between you and the distributor, somehow prove on account of non-payment or non-existence subject matter of contract, your supply is failed, and once that is so, you are eligible for refund. Okay.
So one more question.
Yes, sir.
Regarding the current situation, because of the contagion issue, most of the companies will actually resort to captive consumption of a lot of materials. They will start producing their own materials whenever and wherever possible. What would be that captive consumption arrangement under GST?
There is no supply. Sure. There is no supply and there is no tax on that. Okay. GST requires 2%. Since there is no supply, no tax.
So there is an advantage under GST if we utilize the current scenario to go for more captive consumption.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Next question, please.
Sir, Mr. Ramesh wants to ask a question, sir. Ramesh, sir, you can go ahead.
Good afternoon.
Ramesh, you are an expert. You are embarrassing me.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Tell
it's
me.
a basic question where with regard to repeal and saving. Whether the department will have a power to issue show-cause notices, which they left to issue after 1 year, completion of 1 year from the date of.
Certainly they can.
Or it will be applicable only to the already issued show-cause notices.
No, old proceedings will continue. Fresh proceedings can be initiated.
That's what.
We can have a separate session. Okay.
Yes.
No problem.
Thank you very much for the lucid and.
What is this? Ramesh, don't be. Okay. Come on, next.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So, Mr. Ashish, I'll just unmute. Mr. Ashish, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Please, you can ask your question. Quickly, please.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, sir.
It's audible, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're audible.
Sir, a small doubt.
Hmm.
So a small doubt. You are explaining section 19. So nowadays, states are bringing amnesty scheme. So can that be brought? You said no action can be done.
Technically speaking, no. But since the benevolent legislation, nobody will challenge it. Okay. So since the benevolent provision,
Okay. Legally they cannot bring.
Unless
Okay.
I have not thought about it. Very difficult, very deep question. Very deep question. I don't know whether it can be treated as an executive power of the government to remit, okay, or the legislative power, okay. With the executive power, certainly they can have, but since it's a provision to our benefit, nobody will challenge it. If a public citizen
So the
challenges it,
reason,
yeah, tell me. Reason why?
yeah, sir, please.
You please continue, sir.
Sir, I was saying like when in income tax also they brought certain schemes like this, VDIS, it was generally challenged like you rightly said that
That's
under
right.
PIL. So if anyone can challenge,
then there's a problem. There can be a problem. There can be a problem. Okay. Okay, no problem.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Right.
So Mr. Raghavan also has a question to ask. Raghavan, sir, you can ask your question, sir.
Sir, Raghavan here.
Raghavan, what is this? Come on. Okay.
If any levy is made as cess, does it automatically mean that it is for specified purpose only, or can at times cess can also have the character of tax, though only named as a cess?
Actually, nomenclature in the tax is not decisive. Okay. The act which calls it as a cess will also have a provision that this will not form part of Consolidated Fund of India. It will form part of the rubber board and spent for this purpose, etc. Okay.
Thank you.
But as far as education cess is concerned, it does not say, for example, if you say rubber cess, produce cess, spice cess, etc. Those acts will say the amount collected will be handed over to the spice board, etc. Your education cess doesn't say it will be handed over to such and such person for spending in education, etc. So the nomenclature education says a misleading nomenclature. It is nothing but a surcharge, and therefore you look at this section, it will say in the nature of surcharge. The section will say in the nature of surcharge. So the nomenclature education says is slightly inaccurate. That section carefully uses the word surcharge itself. So all the education will be surcharge. The cess, produce cess act, rubber cess act, which will have a provision that will meant collected and spent for this purpose, they will be cesses. Okay. Otherwise, you know that judgment of Justice Kapadia, where he followed liberty from Calcutta case, mutation fee, he held it is not a, it's a tax itself, not a fee, okay, for a service.
Thank you, sir.
Right.
So, Chakut, sir, you can ask your question, sir.
Yeah. Sir, good afternoon, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'm Shafiq from Chennai.
Oh, how are you?
Good, sir. How are you, sir?
Very fine. Yeah, tell me.
Sir, thank you, first of all, for your time, sir. My question is with regard to the scope and width of Article 246, capital A. Now, you had indicated that 248, which is the residuary power read with entry 97, is now made subject to, and therefore that's a limitation as far as the residuary power is concerned.
Yes.
Now, apparently, the state as well as the parliament have exercised their power under 246A. There is a GST in place.
Right.
Now, is there any limitation? I don't see any limitation. If the state or if a particular state wants to levy a tax which has been subsumed, I see a limitation. In addition to GST, for some reason. Now, because goods and service tax is on supply I would think is a sui generis non-descript tax, and therefore you can't limit it to the present GST alone. There could be an additional tax, say a consumption tax or an entry tax.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because I just wanted to
legally yes,
understand that
legally yes,
but it is not desirable.
Not desirable is different. That's not a lawyer's job. Not desirable.
Yes.
But even legally, what is the role of 279A? If the state can, suppose, I'm not saying a wrong sense. I'm not saying a wrong sense. I'm using with some purpose. Suppose a rogue state says, I will want to levy SGST over and above this Okay, I'm using that word in a not a wrong sense. Okay. Then
Perfectly,
it
sir.
may be
Yes.
valid under 246A, but it may follow 279A and therefore may be invalid. So that takes up to the question, is
Yeah,
279A merely an ornament piece or it has something more on that?
Yes.
And if therefore a state
Yes.
introduces a GST law without the mechanics of 279A, can it be struck down?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a big question.
Yes.
Can it be said?
Can I just add? Yeah,
Can it be
can
said?
I just add?
Just one
Yes.
sentence, sir, if you permit me. Where
Sir,
the constitution
sorry.
constitutes central parliament and state legislature as the only competent body, can they abdicate their function to a council consisting of the executives of the state?
Precisely.
That's a question the Supreme Court should decide. Yes, sir. What's the question? Further question, sir?
Yes, I think that was precisely the question,
Yes,
because
sir.
279A, as I understand it, is an executive body, even though constitutional, no doubt.
Hmm.
But once there is power vested with the legislature,
Yes.
I would think the legislature is plenary and an executive body cannot control or
Certainly.
limit the legislative power.
Certainly,
is what
certainly.
I would.
Certainly. Why we say absolutely right? Why rogue state, for example, substitute with the center? Because there is no
Yes.
subject under the sun which the center cannot legislate. That's the
Cannot
principal
legislate,
subject,
yes.
it being in the list 2. Once it's not in list 2, therefore can
That's the
center
end.
make a law ignoring
Yes.
what the self-imposed discipline?
In fact, they can go back and start levying excise duty as well. We never know.
So they can levy sales tax. They can levy
Sales
octroi.
tax, precisely.
They can levy
Yes.
octroi, which they never levied.
Yes.
That's a big
Yes.
question.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Just gives me a lot of clarity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, there are 4 more questions, sir. How would you...
Whatever you want. Yeah, we can finish that 4 questions. No problem.
Yes, thanks. Mr. Hanish, you can ask.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation.
Thank you.
My question is on state and center's jurisdiction to issue notices. Now, we see that in my assessee profile, I am tagged to state jurisdiction, but center is issuing me notices and the reverse. So can that be done? Because this was deliberated in detail in GST Council, and they said there can be no assessee who can be, made liable to be or to respond to two jurisdictional authorities.
Yeah, I think so. You are right. And just 1 minute. What is the judgment? Just Hegde 39 STC from Uttar Pradesh. Jurisdiction can be very. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just forgetting. 39 STC, Justice Hegde's judgment from UP. Sarju Prasad, no? Sarju Prasad, 77 Supreme Court. Okay. That officer could be assessed by sales tax officer 1 and 2, both. And by the circular of the commissioner is allotted to STO 1. The Supreme Court said assessment with other person without jurisdiction.
Oh, okay.
Sarju Prasad.
Sarju Prasad.
UP sales tax, Justice Hegde's judgment.
Okay.
You may look at it. Clearly without jurisdiction. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Right. Next, sir.
Mr. Sam, you can ask your questions. Mr. Sam?
Yeah. Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I am from Tamil Nadu.
Yes, sir.
I am not practicing the tax side, but I have one doubt. It is a general question. The central government fails to pay the share amount of state government. What is a legal remedy available for state government getting the share of the?
Firstly, state can file a suit against the center under 131, Article 131. And 279 also provides that the state council itself can develop a mechanism for resolving dispute in the state and the center. Okay. 279A provides for it. Okay.
Right, sir.
Okay. So they can file a suit for that.
Right, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Mr. Abhishek, you can ask your questions.
Yeah. Hi, sir. This is Abhishek from Rajasthan, Jodhpur.
Bolo, sir.
Yeah. So my question is regarding, as he said, we have allotted an SEZ development status, and in the normal registration we have an accumulated ITC thereby nearby 10 CR or approx.
Big problem. So there's no way you can liquidate it.
So is there any way like
No,
can we
no.
transfer it or we can
No,
get
not
it
possible.
refund?
No, not possible.
Not possible at all.
Not possible.
So that
not
needs to be righted off.
written off. Bilkul. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sir, two more questions, sir. If
Yes.
Sir, Mr. 1 minute. Sorry, sir. Mr. Raghavan, you can ask your question.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It was a very enlightening presentation, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sir, you had shed light on Article 271 of the Constitution, which was amended recently. It stated that the union government will not have any more powers to levy cess on goods and services tax.
Yes.
Any tax that is levied on goods and services. So my question is with respect to the pre-GST era where the central government had levied education cess, secondary education cess, and the Swachh Bharat cess on customs, etc. Now, when the GST Act was implemented, it had a transitional provision that said that all these cesses that have been lying in your returns as on 1st 2017 cannot be carried forward to the GST era. Now, there was a decision of the Madras High Court recently in the year 2019 that actually allowed you to use the credit that you have paid on the cess to pay off your pay off GST on the output. Don't you think it defeats the very purpose of having a cess? Because the very purpose of having a cess is to utilize that amount particularly for a specific purpose in which it is created.
But then, sir, that's why I was saying this education cess is a misleading nomenclature. It is more in the nature of a surcharge. So the purpose of using that word education cess is to just tell the public we are collecting for education purposes. Have you ever asked for accounts that you have spent it not for education purpose, therefore collection is illegal, etc.? It is not a fee. Okay. It is not a cess in that sense. That's why I said if you look at rubber cess, Spice Cess Act, etc., they will provide that this money will go to the boards, spice boards for development, etc. This is not so. Therefore, the acts call it surcharge. So if you rephrase the question, these are surcharges. Can the government do that? Surcharges is for the purpose of the union.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Sir, last question, sir. Mr. Aditya Reddy, ask your question.
Sir, good morning, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, actually, an elementary question, sir. I'm not sure if it is directly within the ambit of the presentation. Sir, you mentioned that under the, sir, in terms of the nature of the tax being a consumption-based tax under the article, do you think it mandates, sir, in the manner contemplated under the anti-profiteering mechanism, that a dealer should be compelled to pass on the benefit to the customer, sir? Is it within the constitutional provisions contemplating? Do you think, sir? As an indirect tax or as a consumption-based tax, should a dealer be compelled to pass on the benefit to the customer?
Okay. So you are saying whether it's in the power of the government, but legislature, not government, to enact a provision of this type. So this will be perfectly valid. This will be incidental power. Power to enact a law includes incidental power to prevent abuse of the law, etc. Okay. And similar provisions were upheld by the Supreme Court in that UP case. Number of cases are there. Justice Bhagavati's judgment in 86 Supreme Court, maybe 61 STC. Just see Kasturlal Harlal. Okay. 85 Supreme Court, Justice Bhagavati's judgment, Kasturlal Harlal from UP. Section 29A of the UP Sales Tax Act was struck down by the Allahabad High Court but reversed by the Supreme Court. Okay. Slightly different issue, but laid on in principle the same effect.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, there are two more questions coming up, sir.
Yes, yes, please. Yeah, please.
Mr. Tarun, you can ask your question. Mr. Tarun.
Good afternoon, sir. It's
Yes, sir.
always a privilege to listen to you, sir.
Hey, come on, don't be silly. Tell me.
Sir, there is a 2017 decision of Justice Nariman in Bengal Sarchi case. Which is that in Bengal Sarchi case, it says that service tax in indirect tax, economic theory, but not in constitutional law.
Correct.
Sir, do you agree with it? Number one. And number will you transpose that reasoning even to GST?
Absolutely correct. In law, it's a tax on the selling dealer. Excise duty is a tax on the manufacturer, tax on the customs and importer. From economics point of view, it's an indirect tax. But in law, it's a tax on the selling dealer. And whatever little doubt we had in sales tax is silenced against us in GST, because the charging section in GST says so and so and shall be paid by the taxable person. Unlike other taxes, which is a very peculiar provision, other taxing statutes in the charging section will not specify the person who has to pay the tax. But GST in section 991 says and shall be paid by the taxable person. The last word makes it very clear. There's a liability of the assessee selling dealer only. Okay.
Grateful, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else?
Sir, there is one question which I will ask on his behalf, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Jayakumar from Swami Associates,
Yes,
Chennai.
Sir.
Sir, in view of the section 19 of the 101st Amendment Act, as well as to Gujarat High Court decision, can the SPLDRS scheme announced recently be held as invalid?
Can somebody ask that question? It's a difficult question. I have not thought about it. If it is relatable to the executive power, then it can be. It may not be traceable to executive power. With legislation, then it can be struck down if somebody challenges it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, I may invite Mr. Ramesh to give a vote of thanks.
Oh, thank you.
1 minute. I'm sorry, sir.
So we are part of the bar. Where is the need for thanking and all? Is it not so?
So it's a request from him, sir.
No problem. But I am saying only, we are all part of the bar. We are all colleagues. So where is the need for this? We will do that.
Sure, you will not let us down.
Thank you.
Others who do not know about this person in some small detail, I must tell you that, I used to very often see him in Mr. C. Natarajan's office.
Oh my God, it's a pleasure, sir.
The discussion was wonderful. Mr. Natarajan always used to say that Mr. Sridharan reads a lot and he puts some questions that one has to think before one can give an answer straight away. I always loved the fact that Mr. Sridharan was coming and meeting him, because he said it generates a lot of legal thought.
What you are referred about a person who is irreplaceable. Irreplaceable, anybody irreplaceable in my life. Okay. That's what I can say.
The other thing which I must tell a secret about Mr. Sridharan, that there are a few of them, Balaji and others, who used to read the Income Tax Act on the phone every morning at 7 o'clock for an hour or so. And he's somebody who's always willing to teach, and I'm sure we should all take advantage of it.
Thank you.
Representatives in this group from other bars, and I think this is the time we have now almost touched the number of 400 this time, sir.
Okay.
This shows the magnetic attraction you have.
No, thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. Thanks for putting
Honestly, all this comes out of my heart. I've not even thought of what I should say. But
thank you.
All the members who have attended, including and in particular members from the other bar, I must wholeheartedly thank you. And I'm sure all of you have benefited. We will continue to be benefit Mr. Sridharan's talks in the future also. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Namaskara. Namaskara.
So thank you, sir. Thank you for the view.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And for juniors like me also, sir.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all the participants who have attended this session for coming out in great numbers.
Thank you.
Patient hearing.